Welcome to Origins by the Esports Awards, the podcast that deep dives into the most influential individuals in our industry. Now, typically we talk to players, we talk to influencers, and we talk to talent that are leading the charge. However, to many of you, and rightly so, the most interesting people are the ones that are keeping the cogs turning. The business brains behind the organizations, the publishers, and the production companies. And we have one of them here with us today. Please welcome the Corporate Director of Global Operations at Team Vitality. It is Danny Engels. Danny, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Have you brought your A game today? Because, you know, there's going to be hard-hitting questions.
I'm actually out of office right now in this specific week. So I reserved all my time only to talk to you. So yes, I'm well prepared.
Oh, I love that. Thanks very much. I appreciate you taking the time. Now, you know, Danny, you've worked at some of the most successful esports organizations in the world, but, you know, take me back to the origins of your career in esports specifically. Did you fall into it as many people did, or did you seek it out?
I think it's a very classic story. Grew up as a German kid, obviously playing football, finding my friends there. We moved on to play hockey, and one of the guys discovered Counter-Strike, and then we started playing Counter-Strike. I think we were like 13, 14 years old. I probably shouldn't say that because at that age you shouldn't be playing Counter-Strike, at least in Germany. But yeah, that sparked my passion for esports. We as a friends group started playing some ladder games in the ESL and were completely trash, but the competitive spark was still there because, as I said, I grew up with team sports and definitely wanted to discover that space deeper, and found my passion in sim racing all of a sudden. Became quite good in sim racing, and then quickly moved on to join professional teams up to the point where I was all of a sudden a sim racer for SK Gaming in 2007. And especially back then, SK Gaming was probably the number one esports organization. So very proud to have taken a step, and that's kind of how I got into esports, and kind of never left ever since.
So you pivoted from like the pro player role, and then now obviously you're in like a managerial role. You're a director. How was the transition for that? Obviously, I don't want it to be too heart-wrenching of like, I just realized I wasn't good enough anymore. Hopefully it wasn't that. Was it just like I quit at the right time?
No, it was perfect, man. Look, when I became a pro 2007, it was really hard to also show to your parents and family and friends, why are you doing this back in the days, right? Like no one really understood what it was all about. But in 2007, I actually ended up winning a real BMW M6. That was a car like worth $100,000. It was incredible. As a 16-year-old, so I wasn't even allowed to drive it. But one day it stood in front of my house, or in front of our parents' house. And that was the point where everyone started to understand, okay, it kind of makes sense what he's doing there. So got the support early on, went on to have a sim racing career for like 5-6 years, played a bunch of different games from like Live for Speed, Need for Speed, iRacing, GTR. Always tried to go for the prize money. That's what I kind of did. I think I was the most successful back in the days to do that. And then in 2012, I basically said, okay, I got to start living a normal life, because there was also financial crisis back in the days, right? It was like early 2010, 11, where then tournaments started to disappear, and I couldn't afford living that life on prize money anymore. I went out with a bang, though, because I became Germany's best gamer. It was a title I always chuckle about because it's so funny to say. That was my last tournament that I played. It was a cool tournament where we had to play Need for Speed, Halo, and FIFA at the same time. Super fun. But yeah, probably also how you can tell from the background. Had some success as a player. Moved on, lived a quote-unquote normal life, studied IT management as well as mathematics. And then 2017, got a call kind of out of nowhere from G2 Esports. There was a partnership manager that I worked with in the past when I was on SK Gaming. And they were like, hey, Danny, do you want to do sim racing again? I'm like, well, I'm kind of old, probably not good enough as a player. But they're like, no, we need someone to lead a project. And what I didn't know at that time was a project that was then created together with Fernando Alonso. So it was the legendary G2 Esports Fernando Alonso racing team that all of a sudden I found myself as a manager for while I was still studying mathematics. That was quite interesting.
Quite interesting, to say the least, I think. Now, you've obviously got this unique perspective, I think, going into a more managerial role within organizations, but from a pro player's perspective. So I'm imagining all the pro players love working with you because you understand where they're coming from if there's any issues, or just if you're providing help for their career as well. Do you feel like there's any iconic or pivotal moments that really thrust you forward in your career? Because like you said, you've bounced from, SK as a pro player, you've been at G2, you're now at Team Vitality. Clearly you're doing something right. So is there just like a level of consistency that you bring to the table? Or do you think that there's been certain moments throughout your career where you've gone boom and people have really started to notice you?
I think it's kind of both, even though I'm a guy that kind of likes to stay in the background and also gives a lot of credit to the team managers that I'm working with. I think it's a heavily undervalued role, and all these guys and girls make so much for the teams and their respective success. So I definitely want to give shout outs to every single team managers out there. Keep grinding. Your time will definitely come, and make sure that you have bosses that also appreciate what you do, because that's also what I definitely highlighted every single time that I work with someone. But I hope that the players, I came across so many players over the years, it's actually crazy. But I appreciate every single one of them, and I hope that they can only say good things about me as well. Obviously, you end up in arguments at times, and I think I understand I understand the side of the player, and I really am able to balance it out in a good way. There are certainly moments where we go through tough times or really challenging moments that define the future. I'm thinking about specific roster moves that we made across like the organizations that I've been. But I think the first realization that I had was working with Formula One when I was in the Sim Racing project. It was my first big challenge that I had working with Formula One coming in, the actual Formula One company, building F1 Esports, and basically saying, okay, screw all these esports teams. We're going to do our own thing, and only the F1 teams are actually allowed to have their drivers in a competition. And then our players in G2 were like, well, then what's the future for us? Because we can't really continue as G2. We want to try for the Formula One teams, right? And there was the point in time where I was able to segue nicely into a future with Red Bull Racing. So we created the Red Bull Racing Esports project. And that was also probably my call up in G2, because that was the moment in time when Carlos and Peter back in the days gave me the promotion to take over head of esports in G2. And that was obviously quite pivotal for me personally.
I think also being given that extra level of responsibility does come with its own negative connotations potentially, because esports management can be quite fleeting, can't it? Because like most sports, when you're up, it's stratospheric. Everyone loves you. But then if you start not placing in the top 3 for a certain period of time, people start getting nervous, right? Like, do you think that you thrive under those kinds of pressures, or you just know when to make moves, like you said, like roster changes and, you know, adapting the team? Do you feel like you just have that level of understanding, or does the pressure sometimes get to you?
Pressure gets to us all. I think the internet is a crazy place at times, right? Like social media puts a lot of pressure not only on managers but also the players themselves. So definitely you want to factor that as well. But overall, the experience that I was able to bring to the table, not only as a player, but also with my own education, kind of looking into data and mathematics and really making a scientifically backed up decision making process probably helps a lot as well. Ultimately, I believe that after I went through G2 Esports, Eva Geniuses, now Team Vitality. I've soaked up so much in that process that I'm in a good position to read the room and read the situation in a way that we can manage it in a good possible way. And I think the track record also shows, like the teams that I've working with, not only fantastic human beings, but incredible performances, right? Like the stuff that I personally have experienced, I'm so grateful and blessed, from the legendary 2019 League of Legends run that G2 Esports had with like MSI and World's Finals. Breaks my heart. But now also in Vitality, just recently winning the Grand Slam in Counter-Strike, I couldn't ask for a better setup, and especially all the people that I work with.
That is honestly incredible. And may I say, what does it feel like getting a shout out from the president of France after winning the Grand Slam?
It's crazy. And by the way, I kind of use that every now and then as pitches to players. Like if we want to attract players, especially in our Vitality, I go to this one legendary photo that shows Emmanuel Macron in his Team Vitality hoodie, and kind of show the players, look, this is what Vitality is all about in France. And it probably helps a little bit, but it doesn't see the deal more often than not. But it's so cool, man. It's so cool to see esports overall recognized.
That is peak success, I've got to say. I mean, it's going to be tough to beat that in 2025. Now, you create these teams across multiple esports, like you've mentioned, Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Valorant as well. Is there a meticulous process in the selection criteria when it comes to the players, or do you just have to judge whether or not these players gel together in their roles? I imagine it's probably a little bit of both, but it seems like there's not a huge amount of the outcome that's under your control as a manager. You just kind of got to put the players there and just watch them over time. How do you create these rosters personally?
I can imagine it's hard to summarize this in a 1 or 2 minutes answer, but there goes a lot into roster building overall, based on experience, your personal feeling as well, but you obviously want to try and back it up with as much data as possible. So you're not personally biased by whatever your thinking is. Additionally, you also have, and you see this more and more in esports organizations nowadays, you see more and more coaches and team managers being around that obviously are seen to be experts in the respective games and should also factor in their respective voices. We typically work with a scorecard system where you define what makes a player good in a respective game, right? And then you have one scorecard that then all coaches and all experts work with to fill out their personal opinion. But it kind of is a data process where you then over plenty of inputs get a good average together and understanding, okay, this is what seems to be the right choice. Ultimately, you also want to factor in the player decision making, right? You should not give, in my opinion, you should not give the full control to the team, but you have to respect them quite a bit. It goes back to how to work together with players at the end of the day. And ultimately, the goal is the same. They want to win. We want to win. Yes, the organization also needs to run this as a business. So we can't just spend money. But ultimately, the target has to be aligned. And the players need to be not only comfortable with the setup that you give them, they need to give 110%. And they will only be giving you 110% if they also have the full trust in the organization, right? So trust building with the players, I still believe is a very, very, very important process. But then there's so much that goes into this. And yeah, some master it better, some fail with it. And I think Vitality also has good learnings, especially in League of Legends. We have not cracked the mystery yet either. But therefore, especially in FPS titles, I mean, I guess there's no better organization than Team Vitality right now when it comes to first-person shooters.
Yeah, I think before stuff like 2020, 2021, it was very difficult for people to figure out, like, how do I turn pro? How do I know if I'm good enough? I think there's a lot more out there that, or information at least out there for people to then realize, oh, this is the pathway to pro. But before, 2020, it was a really difficult thing to understand, and a difficult, like, oh, how do I get in the room with these organizations? How do I contact them? And how do I, showcase my ability so that I can get onto these teams? So it's interesting to hear your perspective on that, because for a long time, I think that it's a very closed off industry, isn't it? In the kind of at the upper echelons of it as well, right?
I think it still is. I think it's still a relatively small industry. I mean, experts still talk about this being early ages, right? Like, let's hope it grows into a super massive sport in like 50 years, and we have youth clubs and all, hopefully also in the US, the college system all established. That would be amazing. But for the time being, I think the best advice that I can give is just the players need to appear in tournaments and perform in tournaments, because that's typically what I start to look at first, historical results, and kind of get a good feeling for a new game. And obviously, new games is kind of my current focus, because with the Esports World Cup, we had the challenge to discover a lot of the new games, right, that Vitality has never touched before. So I spent a lot of time researching, okay, what has happened in the last 2-3 years? Let me look up Liquipedia. Shout out to them. Amazing platform. Helps me so much in my day-to-day work. But then it also goes on with, like talking to the expert, talking to some casters, talking to some players, talking to some coaches, and just building your network and knowledge through the people that actually know this space. And it's all about data collection at that point in time. And then typically, if I have a target, I will definitely get in touch with that target. But my DMs are always open as well. Like, I don't mind people just sliding into my DMs and just giving me their passion and thoughts, because this is also how I started. Like getting into SK back in the days was not easy either. And I was also lucky. And that's also definitely a thing. You have to be lucky and in the right place at the right time. But you manipulate your odds by, like going out there and being passionate, for sure.
I mean, a huge shout out to Liquipedia, by the way. Definitely helping me with my job as well. Speaking of my job, I'm on stage with these players. I'm at Esports World Cup, or I'm working quite heavily in the mobile industry as well. I think that for me, from my perspective, I'll be interested to see what you have to say about this. But for me, granted, my perspective could be perceived as surface level because we're on stage. I personally don't think that players should be allowed to refuse interviews. And I kind of have this weird, like, multifaceted approach to this, because, I feel like they should jump at the opportunity because it gives them as a player more, more views, more eyes on them, right? But it also gives your organization more screen time, which ultimately is what you guys are looking for as well. Do you, provide media training for all or most of your players that you sign? And what's Vitality's outlook on things like media or interviews? Because granted, if you feel like it's going to negatively impact a player's performance because then they have to focus on something else, then I see that as an argument, but I also see that as the only argument. But maybe that's the only argument there is to have. I'm curious to know your perspective.
No, I generally agree with you. We definitely do media training. It's a bit of a process, right? Vateti is now at, I think, 14, 15 teams in total. Don't call me about that. I should know better, but there's so much in flux right now. You can imagine it's like probably close to 100 players that we're working with, 100 players and staff members, because we also want to take sure that the staff members can talk about the organization as well. So it is a step-by-step approach where we obviously prioritize your players that are more often in the spotlight. But everyone definitely will get media training. And the issue is that one media training is not necessarily helping them too much, depending on which persona you are, right? So it has to be a constant process, and people will have to learn over time to be more comfortable in front of a camera. I agree with you that ideally we want to have all of the players go out there and feel comfortable in front of the camera. But we also have to acknowledge the fact that some of the players that we sign literally live this bedroom to big stage within a month, sometimes dream that confronts them with so many different things, and then a camera into your face, a microphone, a person like you that talks perfectly English, and like most of our players are not even English speaker by heart. So there are a lot of things that just come together, and goes back to building the trust of the players. If they really don't want to do it, we need to find alternatives. And I always appreciate the players that then step up and can lead the team also in certain ways. And you probably see this across many different esports teams, that then you have leaders of the team that take more interviews than others. But it's also, I think, to protect some of the players that are still either young or just introverted, not feeling too comfortable. And ultimately, you want to have them at 100% comfort level to perform at the best level, right? So it's a bit of a balancing game. But yes, I would love to see everyone just go out there and show their persona and show what they're worth, because that's also important as part of esports business at the end of the day.
I think that trying to be the best at my job as well also comes with, when I'm interviewing a player that clearly doesn't look like they're comfortable in the interview as well, I'm trying to assess their body language and the way that they're answering questions in order to help them. So I've said this to a few people before, that when I'm asking a question, I'll see how comfortable they are. And if I feel like they're going to struggle providing an organic answer, I'll actually just give them options in the question itself of what happened there with blah, blah, blah. Was it this or was it this? So I'm kind of giving them an out so that they're not having to conjure up some sort of incredibly, wordy answer by themselves. But, it's forever changing. On stage is forever changing as well. And, the scale is forever changing. Let's just say the esports landscape is always changing, right? How are you staying ahead of the game? Let's talk about Vitality now, right? What's Vitality doing differently to other orgs to stay ahead of the game? Because you guys are, for lack of a better phrase, smashing it at the moment.
Yeah, it's for me, I'm so honored to be part of Team Vitality, to be honest. I've always admired them as the powerful French brand, right? Like, it's so crazy how prominent and how popular Team Vitality is in France. But Nico Neo, as the CEO, brought me in last year with a clear target of, okay, let's become more global. After winning the Esports Awards in 2023 as the best esports organization, felt great, but it felt like it was off the back on Counter-Strike and Rocket League in particular, right? Like, the success that we had there definitely played a role, but to become truly global, you need to have more than just your French footprint at the end of the day. And I say only because it's a massive footprint. So my job, and I joined like more than a year ago now, was to go out there and look for opportunities how to make Vitality more global. The Esports World Cup came perfectly as a strategy piece, because we were able to look into new games, new territories, and new players that we could add on to Team Vitality to give it a bit more of a international footprint. And from there, we started scaling. And nowadays, it's definitely about finding out how to be ahead of the curve, because they're like all the competitors out there, like your Falcons, Liquids, it's so tough to compete against them. And I hope they will say the same thing about Vitality. Yeah, and my goal is basically right now to look into new ways and areas how to make Vitality more global, but also to make it a global powerhouse. So not only just for the sake of becoming global, finding teams out of nowhere, we also want to have champions, because that's definitely one of the DNA that Team Vitality has, right? Vitality stands much more for the sports side of things, winning championships, being world champions, rather than your hoodie companies or music video companies or whatever other organizations do. So we really breathe the sport. And I like that so much, because my background is obviously in sports, right? And I want to be part of this. And I want to have a huge fingerprint on the future as well.
Now, you've mentioned the 2024 Esports World Cup. You actually acquired the women's MLBB team from Bigatron Esports to play for you guys at the Esports World Cup that year. Now, are you continuing to push into the mobile esports scene?
Indeed. So I don't quite know when this will go live, but let's go for it. So Vitality is doing a milestone move. We will acquire majority stake in Bigatron Esports. BTR being one of the most prominent brands in mobile gaming, especially in Indonesia and Southeast Asia, not only gives us that fan base that hopefully will accept Vitality as one of theirs, but also a team in MLBB, so MPL Indonesia, which we know how big it is, right? PUBG Mobile, Honor of Kings, and Free Fire. So all of a sudden, Vitality getting into all 4 mobile games that will also be present at the Esports World Cup definitely is a huge move for our Esports World Cup campaign this year, but especially also for the business side of things. I think that makes Vitality clearly the number 1 in Europe, if we count Liquid kind of like American-based due to their ownership group as well. I don't think we have to hide ourselves behind a G2 or Fnatic. If you look at the track record right now, we have like double the amount of teams that they have. We have more competitive success. I mean, Counter-Strike obviously helps a bit in there as well. I really see Vitality with this move to be the number 1 European organization out there. And who knows, maybe we can compete and win even more so that we can also shoot for this prestigious trophy that you guys have with being another esports organization of the year of the world, potentially. That's definitely what we want to be, right? We want to be the best organization in the world, and Vitality also never stops. Even if we fall down somewhere in some games, we never stop and we keep going, and that's a huge move that I'm super proud of.
As someone who works predominantly in mobile esports, I am so excited for that. To see like a powerhouse esports organization step into the mobile esports world is so amazing, and it's also a great opportunity for up and coming players as well to strive to be a part of Team Vitality. Hopefully other organizations will follow suit as well, especially like you said, as it being a part of a wider campaign going into the Esports World Cup this year. I have to say I like your chances, but stepping into mobile esports, what have you noticed already? Are there any challenges you're facing already thinking, oh, wow, we didn't anticipate this? Or maybe, something positive that's come out of it where you've gone, oh, wow, this is so cool. Because the mobile industry is so much bigger than everyone thinks.
Bro, I was mind blown. It's like, after G2, where our focus was mainly on the PC gaming side of things, right? Especially League of Legends, Counter-Strike in particular. We did a bit of Brawl Stars very early. Clash Royale, actually. You had Clash Royale team as well early on. Then I moved on to Evo Geniuses, where mobile gaming wasn't really a topic at all because Americans don't seem to care too much about mobile gaming, especially on the esports side of things. Coming over to Vitality, it kind of felt the same, but with the door opener of me having this playground and also trust from Nico and Neo to go out and find amazing opportunities, discovering Southeast Asia was so amazing to me. I took the chance because of the MLB women's team that you have mentioned was kind of like door opener in the sense that like I was looking for a team that can help us to succeed at the Esports World Cup. And you need to have winners for the Esports World Cup, as simple as it is. Even though the team failed to win, fingers crossed that it will be different this year. It was obvious to me that it was a team I wanted to have for our Esports World Cup campaign last year because I knew they would be smashing it in Riyadh. So I took the chance to meet them in person in Jakarta. And not only did I meet the women's team in Jakarta, I met Moonton, I met people from Tencent, I met Bigatron already back in the days as well. I went to the MPL Indonesia studio, and I was happy. I was positively surprised how much it felt like the early days of esports. I don't want to undermine where mobile gaming stands, but it was like, it gave me the vibes of me competing at Gamescom, this exhibition style atmosphere with people. So being so passionate about the entire thing. And ever since then, I came back like 3 to 4 times to Jakarta, went to the MPL Indonesia Grand Finals that Liquid won with like 4 million peak viewership. Crazy, man. Like this place was packed, and it definitely sold me much more on not only mobile gaming but also the region, right? Like if people talk about Southeast Asia, you typically hear you can't really make money in Southeast Asia, but I truly believe if there's a place where this can work, it will be Indonesia. That country is not only so passionate, it's so young, it's so driven by mobile gaming as well. I give you a fun story because the first time I went there, I was actually caught in customs because I brought all the Vitality jerseys and shoes for the women's team with me. I was trying to be sneaky and wanted to save some customs. So customs got me, x-rayed my luggage, saw 7 pairs of Vitality shoes, way too small for me. And they were like, what the fuck are you doing? I'm like, how do I start to explain? Because in Europe, it's hard to explain esports to people, right? And then I started talking about Mobile Legends. And even the police officer were like, oh yeah, we know MPL, we know MLBB. And they were like, I was like, what's going on here? it just tells a story, right? Like it's so mainstream, especially in Indonesia, and I think it shows in which direction the world trends. I don't think mobile gaming will become as big in Europe and North America, but I think mobile gaming will have a stronger role, more relevant role in the rest of the world as well.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to that, 2023 PUBG Mobile Global Championships was held in Jakarta. So a similar experience for me, going out there and seeing the reaction and the fandom that PUBG Mobile has out there, and just how it's almost like a national sport. It's absolutely insane. We had the Olympic walkouts. You'll be happy to hear this. We had the Olympic walkouts where we're announcing every team as they come out onto the stage. We announce their previous victories and, you know, a little bit of history about each team as they walk out. And it got to introducing Bigatron Esports onto the stage. And I have in-ears that are molded into my ear, so I can literally hear everything crystal clear. I couldn't hear what the producer was saying in my ear when we announced Bigatron. They just went ballistic and stuff was thrown in the air, thrown onto the stage. I've never experienced anything quite like it, and I don't think I've experienced anything since. So, yeah, I'll be really excited, and hopefully we can go back to Indonesia to do a few more mobile games because honestly, it was just the most exciting thing. There wasn't enough space to cram as many people. People were turning up in droves in these huge buses and were being refused entry because we were at max capacity. And that's what you love to see at things like this. It's almost trending as if it's a traditional sport like football. But you know,
and you know what's cool?
Yeah,
it's like the Esports World Cup gives it relevancy now. You know, like the Western world has always overlooked not only mobile gaming, but also the developments in Southeast Asia. Maybe rightfully so, because it never really concerned the business that I have been working on as well, right? But with the Esports World Cup opening up the doors to mobile games being relevant for the club championship, all of a sudden, all these organizations that are ambitious for the club championship also have to deal with mobile gaming. They have to take decisions, okay, do we want to be part of this? And how do we want to be part of this? And all of a sudden, this one tournament helps to really connect the world even further to the point where hopefully we can also have a lot of the French fans that we have in Paris and rest of Europe to be excited about adding on new mobile games and new teams over in Jakarta as well. And I dream about this moment. At one point, we will definitely bring our Golden Hornets, the legendary fan group that we have together with the Bigatron Troopers. It's a bit of a smaller fan group, but it gives me similar vibes. And just seeing, you know, like this exchange of cultures, right now, already thinking about this, I will be speechless, you know.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that as well. And yes, by opening the doors and getting more eyes on mobile esports, hopefully, you know, other organizations like yourself will follow suit, and then it will just become a powerhouse globally. I love it. Let's talk about trends. Do we have any esports trends that are coming up, that are bubbling underneath the surface that you're particularly excited about? We're going to get on to talking a little bit about AI and data. Not something I'm an expert in, but are there any trends that are, you know, pushing through that you feel like you want to really grab it by the horns at Team Vitality?
It's interesting because right now it feels like we are in a stale market, and it's kind of silly to say that because we just talked about so many things that only recently has happened. But I mean stale market by, it feels like the first time where tier one games or esports games overall are kind of saturated. You know, like it's really hard for new games to come into the market and take a role in esports. I think the first-person shooter and even strategy shooter side of things is kind of clear when you think Counter-Strike, Valorant, Rainbow Six. I don't even know how another game title kind of survives in that ecosystem when you think about esports. I think that's probably also why, you know, like a Deadlock and Marvel Rivals, even though they are a bit more like Overwatchy style, they still will have a hard time to really get off the ground running. I think Valorant hit a bit of a sweet spot with everything coming together, also COVID obviously at that time. But therefore, trends are hard to find. I truly believe, that's a bit of a hot take, and I hope to go back in like 10 years and tell everyone, look, I told you so. I truly believe we will see something new for esports, big in esports, coming out of the Fortnite or Roblox universe. Because if you think about all the legendary games, even Dota, League of Legends, Counter-Strike, they all started as a mod in some games, especially Warcraft 3, right? Or Half-Life in that sense. For sure, there will be some kind of mod coming out of or some kind of creator map coming out of the Fortnite and Roblox space that will become the next future esports at some point. And we don't want to miss that hype, but it's really hard to also understand how to work with the Fortnite and Roblox space. So that's definitely something we are looking into as well from Team Vitality. Short term, I think interesting to talk about is probably the move that Esports World Cup did with chess, and talking a bit about how chess fits into the esports world. I think that's an obvious one for this year. But besides that, I mean, the industry remains a mystery, and it's going to be quite fun to find out what the future looks like.
Yeah, you either ride the wave or like you create the wave. And I think that it's very difficult to know what's going to pop, because like you've mentioned, these other games, Marvel Rivals, Deadlock, things like that, it seems like they're given such a short period to blow up into the scene. And then we're kind of, if they don't succeed, or if numbers start dwindling on Steam, then they kind of get cast aside so quickly. Yeah. And I don't really understand. We need time, obviously, to build momentum and build interest in the esports side of it, which clearly is more of a long-term strategy. Like, why do you think these Overwatch style games aren't getting the love do you think it's just like a peak of players like in the first week or so because it's a new game, and then when it tails off, it's just forgotten? How does it have its resurgence?
Yeah, I mean, they're great games, right? Like, let's not gonna lie about this. It's fun to play, but I think to be successful as an esports, you also need to be fun to watch right off the bat. And these games are really hard to follow at times. I mean, I would even say like League of Legends is really hard to follow, but it just had a better setup back in the days to grow over time, to have the viewership that it has, even though we can also talk about the downfall of the LCS, which is quite shocking, I have to say, after being part of the LCS for 2 years and Evo Geniuses. Definitely concerned about that side of the planet and League of Legends. But overall, yes, I agree that it's really hard to maintain a good community if you don't have it all together. If you don't have a great game, if you don't have a good viewership experience as well, if you don't influence people through the big ambassadors that are there as well, I think you also definitely have to think about esports and esports organizations to create a certain longevity of your game overall. I mean, that's why Counter-Strike, League of Legends, and all these games are still there anyways, even Dota. So I think it's also good learning lessons for publishers, but I don't want to ignore the fact that every single year you have a different setup and a different environment that you go out with your game with, right? And right now it definitely feels that we have a lot of games already that are simply loved by the respective communities, so it's really hard to gain any market share when it comes to esports in particular. So maybe it's just the wrong time right now. I don't know. We will have to find out.
We will indeed. I think that I mentioned it earlier. We'll maybe touch on things like AI, but are you guys utilizing it in order to track data? And, where do you see that going maybe in the future when it comes to organizations and how they're run?
We're definitely using it. I think for me, with my math background, it's super early stages. I think what you also struggle with early on is, there are many things, many different hurdles. Don't even touch on all of them, but API access into data for games is always a challenge because you rely on the publishers to give you access to the data, right? So how do you even get data to begin with? And it's a nightmare if you have games. I remember even back in the days, Rainbow Six not having replay system, and we had like in the legendary G2 lineup with like Fabian and Pango, we had Sua sitting there watching all the replays, putting in all the data manually. And I'm like, that's such a silly job if you can just grab the data from somewhere. But if you can't grab it, you can't grab it. So it's really hard. You also need to factor in that the meta of games is changing so constantly. Like League of Legends patches going out every 2 weeks. Like, how do you then sort the data in a clean way that it makes sense for the future AI to work with as well? And ultimately, it comes down to having a healthy data pool and a big data pool that AI can also tap into, right? So we're still identifying the areas that really make sense to then tap into the future with AI. I am personally very interested to spin further on what I mentioned before when we work with scorecards on evaluation of players. I think that could be an interesting area where AI can help us in the future to make proper decision makings. Also, when it comes to compositions of teams, I think that's an area where there goes in a lot of personal bias, and potentially AI can help you to eliminate some of the personal bias. It's really early on, but I think organizations have to invest right now to build a proper data pool so that the data pool grows over in a clean way, in a healthy way over the next couple of years, so that you can then implement AI based on the data pool that you've created. Because if no one gives you the data, well, then you better start building your data pool right now.
Yeah, I believe you could take like a statistical analysis of, let's say, players or compositions, like you've said, and how people gel. But there's something that's got to say about personality-driven players as well, because we're living in an era now where 90% of pro players are also content creators, and that obviously provides a huge boost for you guys at orgs. So how do you balance that as well? Do you have to kind of provide for players this is how you should really structure your time, give them a regime that they follow, because if they are also trying to create content, but you're also wanting them to train to be the best player that they can be, there's a fine balancing act with that, especially with players who are so young as well, and they want to go and live at the same time as trying to become a pro player. There's all these variables. How do you structure that for your players? Is it player first, content creator second most of the time?
Most of the time, yes. To take a step back, I think it's really a team by team, even player by player approach. And that's also where we put a lot of responsibilities on the team managers to help us out on structuring the days accordingly. Some players don't need it. Some players are mature enough to just go out there and be as professional as possible. A lot of players still definitely need that support and need a structured day in order to succeed. And I would even say, don't even only think about playing the game versus content creation. I think a lot of what we have to give to these players, and I hope that this will be part of youth development in esports moving forward, is also the additional parts of life. Like I have seen this so often when LEC players move to Berlin, they have never moved out of their bedrooms or, like from their home. And all of a sudden they stand in Germany, don't even know how to register themselves in Germany. All of a sudden the tax office sends you a letter that you have to pay for your TV taxes and shit like that. They get overwhelmed with so many things. And it's even the simple things. It's like, hey, guiding them and showing them how to go to groceries in Germany and living a normal life, so to say, is super important to make them feel comfortable again. And also building that trust that they can always fall back on someone that then can help them in their life. So it's not only about playing the game and doing content. It's really about being a support system for these young athletes to grow up, to mature, become professional. And I think that's also a way how they will ultimately also pay back. Like if they feel like home, then they are most likely to also stay longer at the respective organization. And I feel like that often gets overlooked in certain organizations. Obviously, not all of the organizations work with player in person. It happens more and more. But even if they're online, I think you have to give them a certain support structure beyond playing the games, beyond content creation, that really drives them to become the future professional athlete that they should be.
When you sign a player, let's say you sign a player that doesn't lean into that content creation side of him, just wants to, or her, just wants to, focus on being the best player that they can be. I feel like as an organization, especially with Team Vitality, with such strong fan engagement, and you're kind of suddenly thrust into the limelight, and you have all these eyes on you because Team Vitality have these, crazed fans, or really, really enthusiastic fans, and so many of them. How do you prepare them for something like that? And is there a system that you go through to go, look, suddenly now you're going to have a lot of eyes on you. People are going to be quite critical, or people are going to be super supportive. How do you help them, forge a path through that?
No, yeah, I think when you sign a contract with Team Vitality, expectation has to be clear what your job is. And your job is obviously to win World Championship titles, but it comes with more than that. It comes with content need that we have, not only from a brand perspective, but also from a partnership perspective. Super, super important, and requires some education with players as well to understand why and how do we best deal with partners. It takes a bit of time. And it's like you mentioned interviews on stage. Like the first time they will not feel super happy about doing this, but if you can get them more and more comfortable, if you can help them going through the process, they will understand, okay, it's part of my job and I'm going to do it. And I may not like it here and there because I rather want to play the game, but most of the tier one esports players that you see nowadays, I think they accepted this and also act as a role model now for the new generation growing up, because all of them will watch content of, like your Caps or Saivus and all the players out there doing the respective jobs. So I think that helps in that process. Ultimately, it also comes down which game, which tournament you're playing in. I think there are a lot of players on our side, especially on the teams that I mainly work on with the Esports World Cup, that really only have the eyeballs on them during the Esports World Cup. So that's a bit awkward because we put them in an environment where they feel safe the entire year, but then all of a sudden all the cameras, all the spotlights is there at the Esports World Cup, and it changes the scenery quite a bit as well. So we have to prepare them for that too. I think it's a really interesting world, and I can just tell to the players out there, if you are an aspiring upcoming pro, definitely understand that your job is not only about winning, it's definitely about much, much more. And by the way, it also helps to create your future career. If you're not good enough as a pro, maybe you're lucky as me and you shift into a managerial role, but if you can create a brand for yourself, you can become a content creator, then there you go. The world is open for you to work with brands and maybe even esports organizations in the future outside of playing the game. And I think that's pretty cool.
And there's no better analysts or casters in game than people who are pros. That is for sure. You can definitely forge yourself a career being on-screen talent as well. If you kind of either age out or just decide that you don't want to play anymore, that's where we see some of the best casters and analysts come from. But, you have this huge fan base. Team Vitality are known for it. Is there any like marketing or fan engagement tactics that you guys have used? Like, where do you think it stemmed from? And is there any kind of marketing tactic you guys have done that really surprised you and worked really well and then scaled that fan base?
So it's very important to note that the Golden Hornets are actually an independent fan group. It's not like something that Vitality controls. So they run all the activities by themselves, which I highly respect. It also reminds me a lot about how traditional sports is run, right? Like the local fan groups that you have. And I, as a German, and also seeing how business was done in G2, I think it's a phenomenon that is thanks to the French culture and the French passion that there is for esports. That community is crazy, man. Like, not only on social media, but the passion they show at offline events. Shout out not only to the Golden Hornets, but also Carmine Corp, Gentlemate fan groups. Like, that is what we need to drive esports more and more forward. And I'm super, super happy to have an organization that has such a fan group and the support and also the pressure sometimes from these people that I really also want to give back from my point of view. Yes, from a marketing perspective, we obviously also work with them and want to include them in certain activities, but ultimately we also want to respect their independence. And something that I did last year, it was so mind-blowing to me again. And you see, I'm still getting like shocked and positively surprised about things I do, even though I'm in esports already 15, 16, 17 years. We signed a Tekken player, Jeon Ding. Fantastic guy. Please go to his social media. Like, that guy is definitely worth a follow. And before he went to the Esports World Cup, we talked a little bit, okay, what can I give to him as a benefit? Because he was breathing the brand of Vitality already so much in his first 6 months. I wanted to give something back to him, right? And we came up with the idea of like, hey, why don't you want to come to Cologne and watch I Am Cologne and just enjoy some Counter-Strike? So I booked him a ticket, got him a hotel for like 3 nights. I went there myself, said hi to him because I kind of live close. But ultimately, he ended up meeting the Golden Hornets. And the Golden Hornets obviously knew him as a player of Vitality. So they started to spend time together. Most often Golden Hornets are kind of French-speaking, not necessarily English-speaking. Jeon Ding, Korean, doesn't speak much English either. But ultimately, in these 3 days, they ended up in the hardcore fan crew block in the arena, standing side by side, arm in arm, celebrating and cheering for the Vitality success at I Am Cologne. It's crazy. Like, that is the best investment that I've made in a marketing activity, just booking a plane ticket and 3 hotel nights for him to go there and really embrace being part of Vitality and the fan group being so open to him and welcoming him as well. Like, that has been great. And then he goes on to EWC, gets additional support from the fans, and just, like 1 + 1 then adds up to 2.
Yeah, I think that when you have a player that not only, like, we've spoken about the media side of things, but as long as they embrace the culture and enjoy being part of the org, that can really translate as well to the rest of the media that they do. So that is really nice to see. I think that you've had your career has just spanned across like so many different awesome things, whether it's orgs or whether it's player activations, whether it's, being part of teams that have had all this amazing success. I think you might struggle to think of this, but if you could think of a decision that you've made in your career that you could change if you wanted to, is there any decision that you would change?
Wow, that's a tough one. And I should straight out of my gut. I think, and this is a shout out to my boy Kenny S. I think we went through a challenging time in G2 Esports where Kenny S ran out of contract. We renewed him for 3 additional years, which made sense at that point in time. And only a couple of months later, we came to the conclusion to bench him, and him kind of being stuck on a contract. I think if we would have known in hindsight in which direction the project goes, that renewal probably did not make sense, and we should have probably approached it in a different way. But these are the things that you just have to learn from. And I'm still super happy that, I can't remember any situation where I left business with bad blood. Even though you go through things like this, as I said, I still chit chat with Kenny on Twitter. If we see each other in person, we're all happy. And yeah, we may have screwed over his career at that point in time to some extent. I can only apologize for that, but for the business, it was the right choice at that moment in time, right? So that was the one thing that immediately came to my mind when you asked the question. Now, for sure, there are other things like this where decision making could have been better. but the positive things in my life, especially in esports, definitely stand out, and that's what I'm super grateful about.
Yeah, I think that's pretty honorable to mention, but also, like you said, it's just decisions that you have to live with and learn from. That's all we can do, right? Now, before we let you go, I've actually got a question that management wanted me to ask, because you're a huge hockey fan. And I believe that I've had inklings of seeing certain esports being competed like within hockey stadiums. I think Rocket League have done it a few times. Is there any elements of hockey or any kind of fandom that we can replicate and grow to that kind of scale within esports? Do you think we should have more events in hockey arenas? What can you kind of pick from similarities between hockey and esports that you would love to merge?
It's funny because if I ever get the chance to talk to hockey execs, and I was so lucky in Seattle. I lived 2 years in Seattle. Was the time when the Seattle Kraken started playing in the NHL. So I quickly even got into the Seattle Kraken bubble because as a kind of amateur goalie back in the days, I know kind of how to play goalie. So I was lucky enough to get into their youth division to help out with the young goalies a little bit and work with them a little bit, which is a nice work balance thing for me, because getting on the ice definitely helps me to get a bit of distance from esports. And I even did that in Riyadh, by the way. Now we're kind of segueing into a different topic, but I ended up playing ice hockey in Riyadh because literally across the boulevard, there is an ice hockey rink. And I ended up texting the local hockey club, which at that time I didn't know it was actually a female hockey club. So I ended up playing hockey in Riyadh. It's my play. Then I ended up playing hockey in Riyadh. I also ended on the central broadcast with a mask as well, which is pretty funny. So yeah, a lot of hockey still in my life, which I'm super happy about. I learned social media. I learned league management. I learned, we were so passionate about our hockey club that I was involved in running the Facebooks, running local interviews, stuff like this. I learned quite a bit for my management career in that period of time. It was kind of like the downtime that I had between being an esports pro and coming back as an esports manager. I definitely spent a lot of time supporting our local hockey club, growing the youth department as well. So I'm very, very passionate about the sport. Got the chance to do it in Seattle. But the point that I wanted to get to is that if I now talk to hockey people nowadays, I turn this around to basically say, hey, hockey needs to step up because look at what esports is doing. I think we're doing much more cooler things and creative things. And traditional sports could also definitely learn from that. And I think it's a pretty good testament to what we all do here.
Yeah, I love that. Mine, I think that we have to have balance in life, and mine is golf. So I can get out. And I actually played golf in Riyadh as well. By the way, the last tee-off time in Riyadh in peak summer, which is when we're there, July and August, is 6:45 a.m. You're not allowed to tee off after then because it's too dangerous. By the time we got to the 16th hole, it was 9:30 a.m. and it was already 45 degrees Celsius.
I made that mistake. I stayed in an Airbnb next to the boulevard, and I brought all my hockey gear. I had this huge ass bag, and I thought the arena is just less than a mile away. Let me walk there. I regretted it so much.
You walked a mile.
Holy shit! Yeah, I was like, okay, that's good. That's good pre-workout for me before hitting the ice, I guess. But it was too hard.
And on that sweaty note, Danny Engels, thank you so much for joining us here on Origins. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Honestly, I feel like we said this off air before we started, but we could be talking for hours about all of the ins and outs of Team Vitality, your career, and kind of where the future prospects lie, especially when it comes to the Esports World Cup. We look forward to seeing what Team Vitality brings to the Esports World Cup this year as well. And congratulations once again on the Grand Slam and for getting a shout out from the President of France.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to attend the next Esports Awards as well, and also listening into all your podcasts. So that's going to be exciting.
Thanks a lot, Danny. See you soon.
Thank you.